Everybody. Howdy, howdy. Welcome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending the GES Community Advisory Group this evening. I believe I know all of you, but for folks who might be listening to this or watching it on YouTube later, my name is Chris Callahan. I'm a Community Engagement Specialist here at the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. We convene this group on a regular basis to talk about different infrastructure projects and different public projects in general that are happening within the Globeville and Elyria-Swansea community. So really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening. And before I jump into it too fast, I want to hand it over to Francisco to do the instructions for Spanish language interpretation.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. As part of DOTI's efforts to reach out to as broad a segment of the community as possible, DOTI organizes interpretation for these meetings. If you have not gotten a chance to use this service before, please click at the bottom right of your screen, the globe for interpretation. Some of you might have to click on the More option and select Interpretation, and then choose the language of your choice. Bienvenidos a todos, buenas noches. Como parte de sus esfuerzos por conectarse con el sector más amplio posible de la comunidad, DOTI organiza interpretación para estas reuniones. Si no ha tenido la oportunidad de usar este servicio anteriormente, por favor, pulse el globito en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Algunos de ustedes quizás tengan que pulsar la opción de más para obtener más posibilidades en el extremo derecho donde está la elipsis. Y luego seleccione interpretación y escoja el idioma de su preferencia. Thank you, Chris.
Much, Francisco, and I am getting you added to the interpretation channel. That's wonderful. All right. So again, welcome everybody. We have some great updates for folks this evening. So we'll start with a welcome, and then I'll be handing it over to Mike Bouchard to talk through the program of projects that the City and County of Denver is kind of organizing to help streamline communication and community experiences with the city here in Globeville and Elyria-Swansea. And then we'll go over to construction updates. There is going to be quite a bit of construction starting in GES this year, mostly to do with the kind of Washington Street reconstruction. But there are quite a few projects actually starting active construction. So we want to make sure that you have the information and definitely encourage folks to share out with the community so that we're building expectations for what's to come. And then we're gonna have a little bit more time to talk through North Denver Safer Streets, or NDSS. That's the project that was formerly known as North Central Community Transportation Network. So we, and then we'll go into our next meeting. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Mike Bouchard to talk through the GES program of projects. Mike.
Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate the intro. And thanks everyone for having us. I also want to just take a quick opportunity to introduce Brian Perry, who is a new NUCO employee who joined us a little while ago and will be helping around efforts in GES in terms of coordinating the program of projects and communication. I'll let Brian introduce himself in just a second, but if you go to the next slide, I want to just give a quick overview of what the program of projects is, what the intent is, and what we're trying to do. You see the graphic here on the right, and that's really sort of an example graphic, just intended to illustrate all the different types of work and projects that are going on in these neighborhoods. And it really highlights the fact that we as a city want to have a consistent and coordinated approach to communicating about all of the construction projects that are happening, so that there's a uniform message that you, as residents of GES, there's a single place to go to, that all of the different touch points you have with folks from DOTI, from other departments who are doing projects, there's a consistent thread of communication about what is happening. We know that these construction impacts can be significant, and they have impacts on folks' day-to-day experience, their ability to get around, mobility, access. And we really want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to minimize and streamline the work that's going on, so that these improvements can be delivered as seamlessly as possible for the GES community. So keeping folks informed is at the forefront of this, really, so that GES looks to the city as sort of a single entity, and not, oh, there's DOTI over here, and there's DDPHE over here, and CASR over here. Really wanting to have that one city approach. And really also then looking at minimizing detours and closures and conflicts that the different construction projects can create, so that we're aligning all across the city, across different departments, the project and the construction teams, so that the GES residents have as little sort of day-to-day impacts as noticeable. And really, I also want to note that this builds on the great work DOTI has done. Chris and his team, I see Beth on here, Rebecca. A lot of great work has been done to date, and we are wanting to build on that and add the work that we're doing, and make sure that we're also coordinating with other groups and construction projects outside of the city, like Denver Water and others, in an effort to make sure that communications are centralized, that community engagement that we will be starting around the Triangle and the planning efforts there later this year, have this baseline of understanding of everything else that's happening in the neighborhood. I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Brian. Brian joins us. He's the newest member of the NUCO team, and he will be leading our efforts around the program of projects and the communications and coordination that go with it. So Brian, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I know some of you, I was able to meet last week at the CEC meeting, some of the community members. And yeah, thank you, Mike, for the introduction. I'm really excited. We're working really hard in the background right now to get ourselves organized and to develop a project plan that is really going to be as beneficial as possible for the community. We know that there's a lot going on. These are all very exciting things. But as Mike said, there's going to be impacts to that. And I will be working with the team and with a lot of other city employees to help to lessen those impacts, to coordinate together, and to be a one city team, so that we really can deliver for the community. And that starts really, you know, in the beginning of the project, making sure that we're coordinated on getting city or community input and buy-in on the projects, and that that buy-in and input continues throughout the process of the projects through completion. So really excited with work to be working with all of you and to be part of this GES community. I think it's such a rich and vibrant community, and I'm really honored to be a part of this, and just excited to move forward and to just build this community together.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah.
Are there any questions around this before I hand it back to Chris and Beth to talk about construction update. Okay, then I will hand it back to you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks, Brian, for joining, and definitely warm welcome to Brian for joining the city team. All right, so our next portion of the agenda, I'll be handing it over to a couple of our transportation and environmental infrastructure projects to share and give a little bit of a preview about the construction to come here in 2025. As all of you know, we have been in the works planning different projects and identifying funding for different environmental and transportation infrastructure projects for over a decade at this point. And we are finally reaching the point where we are going to be in active construction, delivering on all of the planning that has been done in Globeville and Elyria-Swansea. And we want to be transparent that it's going to be very visible, and it is going to be an element of everybody's day-to-day life, and want to make sure that everybody's kind of prepared as we head into construction, because it'll be visible. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Matt Schwind to talk about the Lincoln Street Underpass project. As a reminder, most of the active construction for the Lincoln Street Underpass was completed last year before the holidays. So want to kind of continue on and make sure that we're following up on status and completion as well. So over to you, Matt.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Lincoln Underpass, one of the few arterials through the neighborhood. So we wanted to lead this project off, get it knocked out before any construction was taking place over on Washington for any detour needs and additional access. The project's about 99% done, substantial completion with our lead contractor. Main things we have left, just some street sweeping signs, getting the correct dates updated. And then we are also working with Sturgeon and Excel to get the lights installed. This is coming from a different work order with our utility group. So that's currently scheduled for the last week of February. Should be about 4 or 5 days of construction under the actual underpass, and should be a flagging operation, or will be a flagging operation. So access will be maintained, but could be a little slow going for that week. Other than that, everything's taken care of. Went through the punch list, got that squared away. So the project's winded down here and should be complete within the next month or so.
Any questions from folks? I know that it's been a couple months, and the streetlights have been lingering a little bit. Angela, I saw you come up here.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I just want to say thank you. Having walked underneath the bridge now, it feels much safer. I've heard a lot of complaints from people who actually drive there, who say, oh, now it's so hard to get through. And I was like, well, now I don't feel like I'm going to die when I'm trying to get to the bus stop. So thank you all so much. It feels a lot safer. I'm looking forward to the lights going up. It's been a long time coming, but I am very happy. Thank you.
And likewise, Angela, huge appreciation to you and Jesslyn with Prodigy for working with us and kind of helping us navigate construction information and dissemination out into the community. So it definitely takes a team and exciting partnership for sure. Any other questions, comments about the Lincoln Underpass project?
I was just curious. So I wasn't really kind of in the loop before all the construction happened. But I was just curious around the reasoning of making a narrow road even more narrow for the drivers.
Yes. So we did these curb extensions. This shortens the crossing distance for the public, pedestrians, and then it also, traffic studies prove that it slows people down through the area. Also more precise turning, slowing them down instead of making those wide turns at these crossings. So that was the main reason behind that. And then also the curb extension also extended the RTD bus stop there on the northwest corner on the north side of the underpass. So that was an additional improvement to help pedestrians in their bus loading area.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
To kind of follow up on some of that, the folks who are working across DOTI on Vision Zero, which is the city's commitment to bring traffic deaths down to zero, they use these interventions through projects called traffic calming. So the idea is that you're kind of almost narrowing the roadway, which from a psychological standpoint, it helps people really slow down as they're going through these areas. And this specific intersection was identified as part of the Elevate Bond program back in, I think, 2017. So it has been in the works for quite a while, but the idea is to just really kind of bring down speeds, make sure that folks who are entering and exiting in single occupancy vehicles have good lines of sight for pedestrians who might be kind of walking or biking in the area. But it's definitely a change. I definitely understand that, Rebecca.
Well, it just created a lot more digestion, especially when the schools let out. You know, it's already got congested as it was. And then now it just seems like it's a lot more with the curb extension. Obviously, we are a main point. You know, we have I-25, we have I-70. So there's a lot of traffic coming through our neighborhood. But, you know, it was already a narrow road. We have cars parked on both the east side and the west side of Lincoln. And then you have traffic going in both directions. You know, it just makes it like a really tight squeeze. And mind you, there's like semi trucks that come through our neighborhood. I think that's more of an issue than trying to make it more complicated getting through normal traffic for the residents. I think the bigger issue is all of the commercial trucks coming through our neighborhoods.
Okay.
And if I can add to that, Chris, this is Milo from Globeville first. Another thing is that corner was like that for years. So now when we get these heavy snows, that little extension, that little curb that's out there is almost like a blind curb. So we got a lot of elderly, we got a lot of people who have, you know, been used to it for years. And I know it's going to take some getting used to, but when we have the really heavy packed snow, especially when it's plowed, you can't see that little extended curb right there. So as you're driving, if you're in a kind of a low profile vehicle or something other than an SUV or truck, that little curb right there could do a lot of damage to your vehicle. So I could kind of see your guys' point of view, and I guess it's already done. But there are some major cons to that as well that I don't think were actually really properly thought all the way through with the resident or to the residents or let known to, because I don't think a lot of residents actually knew what was all partaking. So also I like to kind of be concerned about how the outreach is going to kind of inform some of the residents.
Okay. That's good to know. Angela, I see your hands up.
Yes, Milo and Becca, y'all know I live here. So for me to walk from South Globeville to the bus stop for the number 8 on 46 in Lincoln, which believe me, I have called to say, can we get one on the south side? I digress. But I do feel much safer crossing, and I've talked to people who go underneath the bridge constantly, mainly moms who have to walk their children to and from Garden Place because it is wider for cars to be able to make that turn. Before, literally, I mean, I pray anyway, but I would pray even super harder that a car was not going to turn that corner super hard and hit me. So I would stand even further back, which they couldn't see me anyway, and then they couldn't see me even more. But now to be able to cross is a great relief for me. I know it's very frustrating. Like I said, I've heard other people complain about it. But I have to say, as a person who has to walk this at least 3 to 4 times a week, I feel safer. Once the lights go up, I will feel even more safer. I think it's vital for the elders and the parents who are pushing their strollers along with their children to get to and from Garden Place. It's safer for them. And, you know, we're never going to have a happy medium ever. We've been used to the streets they were the way they were for, well, I've lived here since I was 5. So this has only been in place since what, Chris, October, November, December.
Yeah.
And
And also, you don't drive, so there's
I'm
pros
not
and cons both ways. I think
exactly.
maybe a sign. I think maybe a sign or some kind of something just to let you know that that little extended part of curve is there might help a lot. You know, just something a visual, because like I was saying, when you're driving in the snow, you have no idea that little island of curb is right there. But I definitely see what you're saying about, you know, you're out there a little bit more, and you know it's gonna have to grow on people. But also, if somebody doesn't know that's there, it's and they think the turn is still normal like that, hitting that curve might kind of push them into you, or away from you. It could go either way, but it's like that little island curve is just it's a really, in my opinion, it's like a unidentified speed bump if you don't know it's there, especially in these snowy conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, I honestly think that speed bumps would have been more effective than the curb outerture. Because even now, like, it's not a smooth, like, it's almost like it's a hard hit, you know, when you're turning, like going towards Prodigy from Lincoln. Because I lived on, I was born and raised on 45th and Leaf Court, so I know that one way. But it's like now, you know, you can mess up your tires. You know, it's not a smooth transition from that outer extension into the road. They try to fix it, but I mean, it's still there.
Okay. Well, and before we get too far, Angela, I want to make sure that you were able to finish your thought.
Thank you, Chris. I know, like, again, it's going to be something we're all going to have to get used to, because we were used to it that way for, you know, Becca's lived here her whole life as well. It's things that we have to get used to. It's things that we have asked for. It's things that people who were involved in this previously brought this up. And again, it's changes that not everybody is going to like, that we're going to have to get used to. But I think the reality is, looking at the fact that we're finally being looked at after how many generations of being ignored. What's done is done, and we may not like it, and we need to get used to it. But I think for the safety of our children, most especially who are walking back and forth, and we know some of them walk back and forth from Garden Place, or get off the bus to walk to and from their homes. That's the biggest safety for those who are walking. I understand it in your car and your tires and all that. But I don't know what else to say. So thank you, Chris.
Yeah, of course. And definitely want to hand it over to Sunbeck. Just one more comment, but before we move on, but want to make sure that we know, like Rebecca, we hear you and appreciate you kind of raising some of the design considerations, and we'll definitely be taking that into consideration as we kind of do other enhancements in that area.
I think the most important thing going forward is outreach. You know, like, I didn't know that this was going to happen, and there's a lot of residents that drive and don't know that this is going to happen, because I'm pretty sure, especially the ones, you know, the Angela says she's already, you know, heard a lot of people complain about it. So I think the importance is making sure that the residents are well informed when big changes like this happen.
Yeah. You're there too. Yeah. Hey, Sunbeck?
Chris, this is AE. I just don't use AE anymore because Alfonso Espino's initials are the same. So I put Sandra. It was getting confusing. Listen, I'm support both what Milo and Angela are saying over the year, and the outreach is always, there's always more people that don't know than that know, and that's has to be remedied. But I feel like a combination of signage, striping, and notification and snow removal, maintenance, it all has to be part of this adjustment being friendly to everyone. And so I would encourage a real engineering evaluation of how to support people that benefit from the walking. I drive a big Econoline Super Duty bus under that bridge probably 15 times a week. And it's absolutely the case that there are some hazards being created by this that have to be more aggressively pointed out. So I would just encourage the city to figure out all the ways that you can put really good notifications of what's going on in the the reconstruction of that in every possible medium: signage, striping, painting words across. You can always add a speed bump too. So anyway, I just want to throw that in because we all have to have support for the adjustment, but it's more than just the adjustment. It's once you get used to it too, people can start to get a little careless just by being on automatic, and then the weather conditions change, or it's icy, or that's so. Anyway, there's a lot that can be done to with graphically, and I'll just hope you consider it on all fronts. That's all.
Yeah, that's really good outreach suggestion. I think that like it's not just building the safety improvements. It's about kind of bringing folks along and making sure that folks have kind of good visual cues about how things have changed as they're kind of getting used to the infrastructure. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our next project, which is Heron Pond. And I believe that I'm handing this over to Terry from the DOTI team to talk about this project.
Thanks, Chris. Well, Heron Pond, as most of you probably know, is located at the intersection of 51st and Emerson, there between 51st and 52nd, right next to the brand new bridge across the river on 52nd. It's part of Carpio Sanguinetti Park there. We've been out there working for a couple years now, and we finally finished phase 1 of the work, which included installation of a stormwater detention basin and some soft surface trails and a few parking lots out there. And what phase 1 really does is set us up for construction of phase 2 when all the fun stuff gets built. So phase 2 is going to include a pavilion. It's going to include play structures like the big butterfly and flower you see in the top rendering there. The bottom rendering kind of shows the pavilion I was talking about. There's a bathroom that's going with the pavilion. There's a little stage where we can do presentations. And then phase 2 also includes a lot more landscaping and kind of hardscape, Alameda trails and plazas up off of 52nd. And then a few more trails around the north side of the site, closer up by 54th. We're putting in a series of trails in the, it's called the Heller Open Space. Some of you may have noticed there's a big kind of viewing structure that we constructed in phase 1 up in the Heller Open Space, and we're adding a bunch of trails that connect to that. Also a trail around the existing Heron Pond, things like bird blinds for bird viewing, and a lot more benches and seats and play structures essentially in phase 2. Phase 2, our contractor really is just getting started now. They are planning on really mobilizing to the site within the next 2 weeks. So within the next few weeks to a month, you'll start seeing a lot more activity out there. Construction trailers are going to show up. Construction equipment's going to show up. Deliveries are going to start coming and going from the site as well. And then phase 2 construction is scheduled to last until next summer. We hope to do a ribbon cutting maybe May or June of next year is the plan at least. And then at that point, the park will be fully open. Right now, we're keeping it fenced off while we get as much of the vegetation established as we can, and also just for public safety as well. So as you can see, the park remains closed until 26. Trails along the South Platte River in the vicinity of Heron Pond and Carpio Sanguinetti still remain open. And we'll talk more about trails in a few slides later. But that's basically our big update on Heron Pond. So we're definitely excited to get started on phase 2 construction and look forward to all the new features that we're putting in. So I guess that's about it on that project. So if there's any questions, feel free.
I had one question. We were just in a meeting the other day, and one of the big concerns was getting bike trails from the communities into those parks and those trails you have spoken about.
Mhm.
So is there a plan in place to start working alongside maybe some of the community members that are spearheading those programs, and to collaborate and see how we could go about getting some of these trails from, the Globeville area, from the Swansea area, to the trail that you're speaking about?
Mhm. So I can't speak to the area as a whole, but I can say that as part of our 51st Avenue and Washington Street projects, we are reconstructing sidewalks, and those sidewalks will eventually connect into the Heron Pond and Carpio Sanguinetti area. For instance, the sidewalks on 51st will take you directly to the park. I believe we're also building sidewalks on 52nd that will then again take you directly to the park. And then as a part of a future phase of our work at 48th, we're building a new greenway between Washington Street and the river that will have a trail in it that will connect to the South Platte Regional Trail along the river as well. So at least on the east side of Washington, between essentially Washington and the river, we are making some trail connections. I can't speak as much to the west side of Washington because I personally haven't been involved with any area plan about that. So I don't know if there's anybody else that could speak up on that.
Beth or Maggie, I don't know if you do have any more context.
Well, I don't have any particular bike routes coming yet, but I know we do have plans in the area that you're going to hear more about this evening for some of these links to be evaluated and hopefully constructed and put in. And then, of course, National Western has the whole park and trail along the river, which connects to 51st Bridge and over 51st Bridge straight to Heron Pond. So the pieces are going in slowly but surely. And I think as we look forward to some of the other improvements coming, it should start to really build out the connectivity network. So hopefully we get there.
I'll also mention the pedestrian bridge at National Western that is in the works in the next couple of years here too. That would connect Swansea over to the park as well.
All right,
And I should add that there is a bridge planned across Washington as part of the 48th Avenue improvements. It's a future phase which isn't currently funded. We don't have plans for it yet, but we have been looking at the option of a trail across and over Washington Street to connect 48th, and that also includes a few other pedestrian connections all around Argo Park as well. So no promises on that one yet, but we have been looking at that.
Thanks, Gary. All right, we've got 2 comments from Chad and AE. I do want to mention that we have 2 more projects construction updates to get through, and then we'll be moving to North Denver Safer Streets. So I want to make sure that we're kind of keeping the agenda moving on, not to rush anybody. Chad, I believe I saw your hand up first.
Yeah, this is Chad, and I just wanted to introduce Gio. He's with the Swansea Elyria Safe Cycle Group, one of our youth ambassadors, and he had a question and or comment.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, at Heron Pond, will the water at the park have constant water flow compared to the park over 70, which I found that the water hasn't been running there?
Water fountains.
The fountains, yeah.
So there is a fountain scheduled to be installed, I believe, in the bathrooms, in the Carpio Sanguinetti Park. So it would be shut off in the wintertime. It doesn't have freeze protection, but during the summertime, it would be, in non-freeze seasons, it should be running. And then there's also a plan to install a water fountain at one point as part of the Globeville levee project as well. And that's down closer to, I want to say, 48th Avenue.
Cool.
Yep.
Nice to meet you,
Thank
Gio. Appreciate you showing up.
Yeah.
Am I up, Chris?
Yep,
This is
you're up
AE.
next.
Okay, so I'm not sure who can address this, but long ago and far away, about 10 years ago, some of the first enthusiasm around Heron Pond had to do with preserving it historically through habitat. It is, if I'm not mistaken, it is the first outdoor classroom with a natural habitat and it's certain environmental attributes that have to do with native plants and that kind of a thing. And there's sort of an unfulfilled aspiration that's been in discussion over the years about really calling forward Heron Pond as a continuing environmental education resource. And there was some brainstorming for a while that didn't go too far with trying to leverage educational projects in collaboration with the National Western Center along the river. And that hasn't developed a whole lot, but I just want to put that out there for discussion, maybe have somebody who's working on this, the landscaping. Where are you with preserving the historical natural habitat and powering it up? You mentioned the areas to look at birds, but there was a tremendous amount of discussion about how to attract the bees and the birds and to do things there that kind of respect what the land has to offer in those arenas. So who can address that?
Such a great question, AE. And Terry, I wonder if maybe at a future meeting we can invite Sensory from Parks and Rec to talk about the.
I can cover it. I mean,
Okay,
Sensory has been involved with it since the beginning, but I can say that as part of phase 2, there's actually a bunch of educational nodes going in that have little signs that kind of describe native vegetation, natural features, things like that. And those are kind of being installed along the trails around the perimeter of the park. And then as far as the birds and the bees go, we're installing raptors nests, we're installing other birds nests, and we're actually installing a bunch of, I guess you could call it pollinator friendly plants. We have specific, and actually in phase 1, in the very first phase, we installed what's called a pollinator garden. So it's basically just a small area of native landscape and where all the plants are selected to help attract pollinators to the area essentially. But I will say that almost the entire site is being redeveloped with native grasses and flowers and trees. So those will have, some of those have already been installed. Like a bunch of the native grass was installed as part of phase 1, and that's kind of what you see out there establishing now in the bottom of the pond. And then phase 2 is when a lot of native plants and vegetation and shrubs and bushes will be installed as well. So it was almost all done with native vegetation with the intent to, like I said, attract those pollinators. And then we've got the birds' nests. Almost all the existing trees out there were protected during construction. to help with that, to save that whatever existing vegetation we could. So yeah, I think hopefully that answers your question.
That is very good news, and that aligns. That's connecting the dots with discussions that happened within the constituency and the neighborhoods. And I would really recommend and request that you create a slide that makes that the lead in some important things. Sensory's continuity in that, and that's fantastic. That is a hugely important element of how this feels and helping people know what's being preserved there. So I would really request that you power that up and make that the lead, because there was a real strong desire for this to happen among folks who have spent a lifetime wondering if Heron Pond could get revitalized.
Good, good deal.
And definitely feedback taken. You know, sometimes when I talk about this project, I call it a climate change mitigation project, which is, you know, jargony, but you know, ultimately this project in its inception kind of started with community and the the Globeville stormwater study and kind of the inundation or the kind of floodwaters that come in with storms to the Globeville area, and kind of trying to build out some infrastructure to help with runoff to make sure that there's less flooding, while also kind of restoring those riparian habitats. So we might think about bringing Sensory and potentially even some of our project managers from our green infrastructure group to an upcoming meeting to kind of talk through the engineering and the kind of why behind the project. So
Chris, that's all good. I'm just gonna I know I'm inserting here, but real quickly, I don't, climate change and jargoning and all this, that's all good. Infrastructure, that's all good. But it is a nature outdoor classroom. It is a link. There's a lot that can be activated, and all of those aspects are important. But I don't want to lose the emphasis of what it feels like within a neighborhood to be talking about feeling the natural environment, to have a recreational park that has the components of the native land and these kinds of things. I don't want to get overly analytical about it. All those things are important. But going back to the original discussions where the tension was, how much can we bring this land back to its natural habitat, and how much can we continue to learn, and can we preserve it? Historically, it was an outdoor classroom because of the natural habitat being preserved. I think it is a very important enrichment for the neighborhoods and an accomplishment to keep that emphasis. So I don't want to overdo it. I just want to state that clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Love it.
Yep. All right. So moving along, we have the Global Levee project, which I saw Lauren from our environmental infrastructure group here at DOTI jump on. Lauren, handing it over to you.
I think I was going to take this.
Yeah, Terry's going to take it. Thanks, Terry.
You're free to though, Lauren. So in addition to Heron Pond, I'm also managing the design and construction of the Globeville Levee project. Just a quick background, the levee in general, there's an existing levee along the west bank of the South Platte River now. It's been determined to be insufficient, and so we are reconstructing it between Franklin Street and 31st Street. The first phase of the work was done in about 2002, there through Carpio Sanguinetti Park. If you notice the trail through the park that's kind of sitting up on a berm, that is the levee. That's phase 1 of the levee. So phase 2 of the work extends that from about 50th Avenue to about 38th Street. Future phase 3 of the work extends from 38th to 31st Streets. So phase 2, construction of phase 2 has just kicked off. Some of you may have noticed our contractor out there setting things up at 48th and Emerson. What we did is we purchased a bunch of property in that area in order to give us room to build the levee, in order to give us room to build the 48th Avenue Greenway, and do a few other things out there. So long story short, construction of phase 2 just started in December. Like I said, this is a longer duration project. We anticipate construction lasting through at least the end of 27 for phase 2, and then future phase 3 would be after 2027, but the funding for that phase has not been identified. We're still working on the design. There's some design issues with phase 3 that we have to work through with local property owners and businesses before that'll get kicked off. But this project, very important to the community. This will keep 700 structures in Globeville, Elyria-Swansea out of the 100-year floodplain. So that will prevent them from having to buy flood insurance, for instance. So huge benefit to the community there. And as part of this, which Lauren will get into a little bit, we're building a new outfall along 48th Avenue. This is a big storm sewer that stretches, it starts really at 48th and the South Platte River. And future phases of this project, the 48th Avenue project, will extend west past Argo Park and up to Lincoln, and then further into the neighborhood north from there, and even future phases of the project. So a few things that we're including right now are a new overlook onto the river at 48th Avenue. This is a kind of a paved area with kind of some boulder steps down to the river. It's got some benches and swings. So this will be kind of like a pit stop on the South Platte River Trail, if you will. This is where we're looking at putting that water fountain that I mentioned earlier. And then what this will do is this will provide drainage improvements for the neighborhood to the west of Washington in the future, and also provide some trail amenities, like I said, the overlook onto the river. And then, like I said, Lauren will talk a little bit about the Greenway project as well, but it'll help in addition to the construction of Washington. It will help green up the neighborhood a little bit. It will improve the trail. The trail is getting completely rebuilt as part of this project and revegetated. And I think those are the major highlights, really. So for the most part, the trail more or less stays in place where it is now. It's just getting reconstructed at different elevations. And then the levee bank itself is being increased in height. There's a few walls that we're building along the trail as part of the levee through there. So those are the major highlights. So happy to take any questions on the levee and outfall project.
All right. And there were a couple additional slides, Terry. Do you want me to go through those?
Yeah.
Or...
Yeah, why don't you keep moving?
Okay.
So yeah, this is the overlook that I was mentioning that's being constructed as part of these projects. You can kind of see in the graphic on the right, the small kind of paved area with boulder kind of steps down into the river, gives us access to the river. There's some bench swings, and then kind of the face of that overlook structure will kind of have some patterned concrete like you see in the bottom right, right there. And then there'll be a few additional plantings and vegetation that we're doing as part of this. So construction of this little overlook in particular is looking to start within the next 2 months or so, and should go until basically the end of the year, I would say, for this piece. So there will be some trail detours that we'll get into a little bit later as a result of this work. That's probably the biggest disruption that you'll see as part of this. But this includes some trail connections to the west. Future Greenway work will take these trail connections at least to Washington Street for now. So if you want to keep going, Chris. And like I said, there will be, as a result of this construction, we have to detour the trail around the work. We've had several consultants look at trail detours during construction, and unfortunately, without building another bridge across the river, the only viable trail detour area was 47th. north on Washington Street across the railroad tracks to 48th. And at 48th, we'll push traffic, trail traffic then back onto the South Platte Regional Trail. So there will be about, 2 blocks of trail along Washington Street until this fall. We're thinking from February until about September of this year. That detour will be cordoned off from traffic with barricades. So it will be, and we'll shift traffic on Washington slightly to the west to allow room for the trail detour to operate. So in addition to that, some utility relocation work will be happening on Washington as well to prepare for construction of the Washington Street project. So I know we've been notifying the local businesses and residents along Washington between essentially 46th and 49th of this trail detour, but we want to make sure you all are aware and see what questions you might have on that, because that will definitely impact trail use for the next few months till this fall, hopefully sooner. We're saying it's going to be active through September 25. Hopefully they're actually able to take it down earlier, but we'll see how things go. Always some unknowns once you start construction that we're trying to account for. So, yep, that's about it.
Pat, I see your hand is raised.
Did you call on me?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, my question again is, I asked it the other night somewhere, is that's one detour on Washington Street. I don't understand why you don't have at least an alternate detour for Swansea Elyria residents to bypass that construction through the National Western on National Western Drive and the already built out trails along National Western Drive.
Because the section of trail that we need to detour doesn't align with the trails on the east side. The trails on the east side of the river basically stop at Betty Cram Drive, and all of our work is happening south of there, essentially. So there was no way. We did look at that. I mean, that was an obvious solution because we have a new bridge at 51st where traffic could cross over, use those new trails in National Western, and then cross back over at the bridge at 47th. Unfortunately, the railroad.
47?
Yeah, at 47th. Unfortunately, the railroad crossing where National Western Drive crosses the railroad was too narrow to allow for a detour. So we would have had to reconstruct that railroad crossing at National Western. All right.
They're going to do that at some point anyway, but this is going to happen sooner. But there's no reason why the public can't travel that route on their own, just like any other road in Denver, right?
Sure, but we just can't make it an official detour because of the railroad crossing.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, moving right along, we have the 48th Avenue Greenway and Betty Cram Drive Bridge.
And I can take this one real quick. Thanks, Chris. I'm Lauren. I'm another project manager with DOTI. So as Terry mentioned earlier, the 48th Avenue outfall that's being constructed as part of the levee project is part of a bigger storm sewer system that will extend all the way to Lincoln eventually. And so the next phase of that, the next construction phase is going to be from the outfall, from the edge of where that outfall is, the west edge, to Washington Street. And that includes a new greenway. And we'll shift the alignment of 48th Avenue north, so it'll be in line with Elgin. And then while at the same time as we're constructing that greenway, we will construct the Betty Cram Drive Bridge, which will connect the new 48th Avenue to Betty Cram Drive on the National Western side. And this bridge will kind of be the sister bridge of the 51st bridge. So it'll look very similar. And so that's all in design now. and that'll start construction about mid-2026. And that project will include trail connections to South Platte River Trail and to Washington Street.
Questions, comments, feedback?
I had a quick question about the floodwater, the drainage system that's going to reach out to potentially Lincoln at some point. Is that going to be just like a gravity system, or is that going to be powered through like some kind of pumps moving? Because we get a lot of water right there around that. So I was just wondering if that was going to be just like a gravity system or a mechanical.
It is gravity, but you're right. There is a lot of water and it is a very flat area. So it's a very, very shallow system. So which makes it pretty tricky, but yeah, it's still going to be gravity and it'll be a big box culvert underneath the ground. And it's like an 8x16 box. So it's a huge box underneath the ground. Yeah, and so right now that box is going to end right on the west side of Washington Street, and then hopefully in the future we get funding to cross the railroad tracks and go through Argo Park and take it further.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will add real quick, at points 2 and 3 on the map, those are potential future pedestrian connections. So that number 2, we were looking at trying to do a box culvert underneath the railroad there as a pedestrian connection to Platte Farm. And then number 3, I think would be, Lauren, that's part of the big bridge that we were looking at, isn't it? 3 and 4.
Yeah, there's a few different options that we're looking at there. Like either a pedestrian bridge or maybe an at-grade crossing at Pearl. Like there's a lot of is up in the air there, and it's still in very preliminary planning phases. But there's a lot of different options we're looking at right there.
Dad, or do you?
East Side. Hey, I'm curious about what's going on if with the 48th Avenue bridge completion on Betty Cram, may she rest in peace. How soon will we be able to get through from Brighton Boulevard on Betty Cram to Washington Street? Are they going to let us get through the National Western Center before, or not until after 48th Avenue Bridge is complete?
Beth, Maggie?
Do you want me to take that one, Chris?
Yeah.
Lauren, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say the bridge itself will be, our plan is to have it completed in 2027, but yeah, Marcy can answer the rest of the National Western connection.
Absolutely. Hi there, this is Marcy Loughran. Great question. Because you're talking about the Marion Underpass, which right now is primarily utilized during the annual stock show, but there are conversations with all of the partners to open that area to pedestrian and bike traffic in the interim until the future phases is decided. That then would be the full roadway would go through from Washington Street all the way up to Brighton Boulevard. Currently, the road configuration would go right through the existing Hall of Education. So again, when we have those replacement facilities complete, then those facilities can be then deconstructed and other assets can be constructed. And part of that is, well, all of that is part of the future phases in what we call the triangle development, and the planning for that process, the community planning and all the elements is scheduled to start later this spring or summer. So we will make sure people get all of the information on that. But when we get the information from the partnership about the pedestrian and bike access through Marion Underpass, we'll make sure to get this out to this group as well. I think that'll be an important piece to at least be able to get through, more so than going on 46, which sometimes isn't awesome.
Maybe just repeat part of that so I can understand better when when that possibly could happen? I heard the word interim in the interim of construction on 48th. Are you saying that it might happen sometime before the 48th Avenue Bridge is complete?
I am, yes, exactly. So that Marion underpass we're hoping can open up to pedestrians and bikes this year, which would give you access from Brighton through Marion Underpass into the campus, which then you could go over to 51st Avenue Bridge is one way to get across, or go 46th by Dencall down to Washington Street. But we anticipate it being in a temporary and interim condition until the future phases is done and until the actual 48th Avenue Bridge is constructed, which, as Lauren said, would be in targeting 2026.
Yeah, that's good news. That's good news. Will you repeat your name for me, please?
Yes, it's Marcy Lochran, and I'm with the Mayor's
Marcy.
Office of the National Western Center.
Okay, Marcy. Thanks for your time. I appreciate that. That's good news. We've been kind of, waiting for decades for that to, well, maybe not decades, but a heck of a long time to get access.
Heck of a long time. Yes, it's tough to get through. You have to go over to Race Court or 40 or down to 46 and under I-7 or I-70, and it gets a little tricky. So
well, let me do say this though. The
What?
46th Avenue shouldn't be taken off of the table as far as bike lanes, because that's definitely a go through for a lot of residents from the north side, from Globeville into Swansea, Elyria, and points
for
east.
sure. For sure. Yep.
Oh, and I just have one more question on the bridge, and we heard that there's been a possible lot of funding cuts, and is that grant money $35.6 million that you're going to build the 48th Avenue Bridge? Is that money been secured with the city authorities?
Yep, that is a great question. We were working very hard in December to get that grant agreement signed and finalized with the federal government. Congress has signed that, and City Council has approved the city being able to take those funds, or accept those funds, I guess is a better word, accept those funds from the federal government. So we are confident, we're cautiously optimistic, but confident that that is still holding true. And based on kind of the back and forth news today, it looks like we're still on track. Again, Congress has approved it, that we do have a signed grant agreement, and City Council. So we are still hopeful that those funds are ours and coming forward for assets throughout the community. Excellent question.
Chad. Yep, and great answer.
I actually have one more question. I hate to backtrack, but with that floodwater solution, is it going to be adequate enough, or is it going to tie in to the south side of I-70 in Globeville? Being that we do have the I-70 bridge separating two sides of Globeville, and if you've ever been to Globeville, as you go underneath the bridge, the I-70 bridge, it's elevated right there. So we tend to get flooded on both sides of I-70 and Lincoln, all the way up to, put possibly, Grant.
Yeah.
So Lincoln, Sherman, Grant. So I was wondering if is it going to be upsized drainage or whatever drain lines all throughout Lincoln Street?
So this basin is not going to extend south. It doesn't extend south of I-70. Like what you see on the map here, the south edge of this drainage basin is basically the bottom of this map. And so everything will flow to where the new pipe will be, and it'll outfall to the South Platte River. So it's kind of its own little system. It's not there are separate storm systems that will address, and separate projects that will address things on the south side of I-70. Does that answer your question? Or are you talking more on Lincoln?
No, yeah, on Lincoln, because Lincoln is the one street that goes through Globeville to both sides, and so
Yeah.
we have a high point. If you go underneath the bridge right there on the I-70 bridge going on Lincoln Street, we have a high point right there that tends to separate the flood waters. So on the other
That,
on the south
yeah,
side on 45th, 44th, and Lincoln, those parts of the neighborhood tend to really get flooded out, and a
yeah,
lot of that has to do with runoff from I-70, and then
yeah.
the water, of course, coming into the neighborhood.
Now,
So
I'm gonna, Mylon, sorry, to interject, but there's an entire kind of Globeville stormwater study that I'll text you
Yeah.
right now, so that you can kind of read about all of the planning work
Yeah.
that's been
I
done.
think you'd be interested in looking at that. I mean, basically everything south of that high point is a different project. Everything north of that high point will drain to this this system on 48th.
okay, so
But
it's
yeah,
46th up to about 51st is like kind of like the project scope all the way down to Washington.
yes, that sounds about right. In the study that Chris has, it draws the exact basin, so you can see the exact
Okay.
limits.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Definitely interested in that.
I'm really
Yeah.
excited to know that you're like attending these meetings because seems like you're really interested and yeah.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
and Beck, a lot of us have grew up here our whole lives, so
Yeah.
we've seen the pros and cons of when the city comes in and they do things and they kind of don't work, and we live with it. You know what I mean? So definitely
Yeah.
glad to be here as well.
Yeah.
And I do just want to add really quick that it will take us a long time to build this system out to Lincoln. So like we have to start at the river, and like it's taking us a year to construct, or almost a year to construct that outfall, and then we're gonna do the Greenway, then we're gonna get to Washington Street. So like we're moving very slowly, and there won't be a lot of water in this system until we really can once we can get to like Logan, then we'll start seeing a difference, but it's just expensive and we have to go like a few blocks at a time. So it's going to be a while before we get to Lincoln. But we're working on it. And we know it's a problem.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that.
Wow. And we do, just as a kind of reminder, we have one more construction update to get through, and then we have the North Denver Safer Streets project to get to. So I want to keep moving, but don't want to disrupt or interfere with some good conversation. So with that, handing it over to Beth to talk through the 51st Avenue and Washington Street realignment.
Hello, everybody. So very excited about all the stormwater questions, and always happy to bring back some of that basic story that you'll find in the stormwater study. So if that's of interest, we can always touch on that at a later meeting, because there's quite a good story behind it all. So I do note that, and I love all the conversations about benefits associated with all of this work that's coming. So let's just talk about Washington for a minute. When sorry, I'm going to move my little thing here, but when we started doing, if you recall, last year, we were out here doing final design on Washington Street. And so there's a whole new cross section coming to Washington. And part of that improvement is the realignment of 51st. So that little diagram there is showing you what happens there at 51st and how we tie that in both east and west on 51st. And this is really sort of a key piece of moving Washington Street as a whole forward. And in order to make that allow us to get to that point, we really have to start with some pre-construction work, which is getting the utilities taken care of. So the first things you're going to start to see in the vicinity of 51st and as far south as 47th is really going to be some utility work and construction. So Excel, Denver Water, anyway, there's probably one or two others that are out there. So they will all be out there working in the right of way and getting the utilities set so that we're paving the way for the actual reconstruction of Washington Street. So with that, this is all part of our communication program going forward, is to try to stay on top of that movement, keep you notified of what's happening and when, and to be aware of when we'll have intermittent lane closures, temporary closures, delays, that kind of thing. So just know that, this is one of those things that happens as we move toward construction, and will be a big focus of our communication program going forward. Any questions on that? Last note there, you'll see next steps. The actual Washington Street construction doesn't really get moving until the summer. So this is just sort of the pre-work.
All
right.
right.
Moving us along.
Yeah, let's move right on into North Denver Safer Streets. I am passing it over to my fabulous coworker, Paige, with our transportation planning group, who is managing that page.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And hey, everybody, Paige Colton here. I'm a transportation planner with DOTI, city's transportation infrastructure department. Here to talk about North Denver Safer Streets, which I did talk about last October. So there might be a little repeat for some of you, but just wanted to rehash what the project is. I'm going to get a little bit into the Washington Area Connectivity and Prioritization Study, just as a reminder of what that study was and how we're going to use it as part of North Denver Safer Streets. And then most exciting, what our next couple of months look like. We're coming to talk to you, so want to highlight that as well. Next slide. Awesome. Okay. So project area of North Denver Safer Streets is the Globeville and Elyria-Swansea neighborhoods. We have these arrows drawn on the borders to just represent, we don't necessarily need to stop at the borders. We want to think about how you all are getting in and out of those neighborhoods, not just traveling within the neighborhoods. So just want to emphasize that there. Next slide. So project goals. We want to build on past planning work. That's why I'm highlighting the Washington area study, and collaborate with you all on your priorities, connectivity challenges, and how to creatively address your needs in terms of transportation. We want to deliver small scale improvements that meet your needs within the next 3 years. That's a big one. We're going to build improvements within the next 3 years. We also want to progress planning and early design on some larger scale improvements, like a local bus rapid transit corridor on 48 through Elyria-Swansea. And then lastly, we just want to make sure we're reaching as many community members as possible and have an equitable engagement strategy. Okay, this is a project outcome slide. This is all the project outcomes that we're hoping to achieve with North Denver Safer Streets. We'll have this on our website too, so I'll dive into that. I won't dive into it now, but you can take a look if you'd like. Okay, so what are we actually doing with North Denver Safer Streets? What improvements are we going to be making? Just want to walk through this at a high level, and can get into details in future meetings, but we want to be able to make crossing safer for people walking and biking and scooting. We want to slow driver speeds to make it more comfortable to walk and bike, and also reduce the risk of crashes. So we don't want people getting hurt on our streets. We can do that with speed cushions, speed bumps like the one shown here. We're able to reduce cut through traffic. I know freight traffic cut through is a big issue. I've heard that a couple times just tonight. So that's something we can address. We can also separate drivers and bicyclists with and pedestrians with separated lanes on the street. We're able to make bus stops more accessible. We're able to put in these what we call amenity pads, which is where the shelters and benches go. We're able to add green street elements, so greenery on the side of the street and also within the street. And then kind of complete multimodal networks. We want to make sure you can get around walking or biking and scooting and driving as well. And then study those transit improvements that I mentioned. Awesome. So project schedule. We are in this blue phase right here, prioritize community needs. So we're building on that past planning work and collaborating with you all to prioritize and figure out what projects we want to be building. Starting this spring, we'll be working towards developing design solutions. So that just means where should the projects be, how the project should look and feel to best address your needs. Then starting this summer, we're going to be refining those designs and we're going to be coming back to you and saying, is this the right approach? And then kind of starting fall 2026, we'll start the construction process with most things complete by the end of 2027, some things being completed in 2028 as well. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, just wanted to talk about the Washington Area Connectivity Prioritization Study that my department, DOTI, published in 2022. I know probably a number of you were actually involved in this process. Beth really helped lead this project as well. And so just summarizing what the, going back.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So summarizing what the study was, it looked at and analyzed historic conditions, past planning work that's been done in the neighborhoods, current transportation issues, and current projects that are underway. And it took all of this, including feedback from the community directly in 2021, and identified opportunities for future improvements that establish a walkable, safe, high-quality multimodal network in Globeville and Elyria-Swansea. So the reason I'm highlighting this is because we're going to use this plan to inform what improvements we build as part of North Denver's Safer Streets, because it so comprehensively looked at past plans and engaged the community in 2021. And I'm hoping a number of you as well at that point. And so we're starting kind of with this as our framework. And then over the next couple of months, we'll be coming to you and saying, is this still the right list of projects? Where are you experiencing specific issues like cars go way too fast on this block, or cut through freight traffic is the worst on my residential street. And then we also want to know what the most urgent improvements are so we can prioritize. We know we have a good chunk of money, but it's not endless. So we'd like to know what changes we should be making. Okay, so just going to walk through a little bit how this plan was developed. Included a ton of different planning efforts that were incorporated into this, including the Globeville neighborhood plan, Elyria-Swansea neighborhood plans, and a number of other studies as well. Next slide. In terms of outreach constructed, so I mentioned most of the outreach was done in 2021. So working closely with this CAG here, also held a number of public meetings to kind of get that feedback on that network and what the priorities were. So just at a high level, sidewalk improvements are a really big one. Definitely improving safety and safe street crossings for people walking, improving connections for people biking and scooting, placemaking, honoring history on our streets, 48th, 45th Ave as a historic Globeville Main Street, safe bike and ped access to basic goods and services, equity considerations intertwined with infrastructure investment, and then plazas and gathering spaces as visionary projects were the main topics that came up. Next slide. Just real briefly, historical impacts on connectivity is walked through in detail in the study, which is pretty cool, but I'll skip this slide. And then just a high level today's conditions that the study covers, talks about how there's a network reliance on 3 main streets, Washington, Brighton, and York, to kind of get in and out of the neighborhoods. Definitely those freight riding challenges that we've heard about, lack of sidewalks, a currently diverse land use, industrial and residential and commercial, and then evolving land use as well, changes coming limited bicycle and scooter connectivity, concentrated safety concerns. So we're really seeing people walking and biking, getting hurt at kind of those major crossings of major streets because it's so difficult to cross. And then it talks about redlining and equity considerations as well. Next slide. Okay, so the study lays out this network of planned improvements that really goes into detail. And on the next couple of slides, you can go to the next slide. I'll show you how in detail it gets about each of these streets, and then specifically about segments of each of these streets. It also describes what the issues are, has photos, a lot of detail about what exactly is needed and desired, what improvements are wanted. Next slide. This is just another example of 44th Ave, a different corridor. You can switch to the next slide, Chris. And just an example of the detail here that was incorporated. One of these line items on the right, 44th Ave, Broadway to Pearl Street. It says pedestrian and bicycle improvements needed along existing roadway, sidewalk improvements along 44th Ave planned through Elevate Denver bond funding. And the next steps are to study and design bicycle facilities through community transportation network efforts, which is this North Denver Safer Streets project. So we are in a lot of these next steps for this project, and we'll be moving them forward through design and construction. Okay, final map of prioritized corridors. This is the last item for the study that I want to highlight. The project team worked to incorporate public input and a number of kind of other evaluation factors like safety, where we're seeing crashes on these streets, multimodal connectivity, environmental concerns, equity, and prioritized all the segments of the roadways. So we know generally where we want to be focusing investment. Those high priority projects are dark red, and then medium orange is mid priority, and the lower priority is light orange. Okay, I really sped through that because I know I only have 5 minutes left, so apologies there. But I'm going to turn it over to Kathy now to talk through just our next steps for North Denver Safer Streets.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much, Paige. My name is Kathy McCaig. I'm with CIG, and we'll be leading the outreach efforts in collaboration with Nora and her team at OV. I'm just going to briefly talk about the planning outreach. It's so great to see that you're all engaged and excited about all these projects that are coming to your area. This is kind of what we're planning to do from January to August. There'll be 2 phases of outreach, which corresponds with what Paige just talked about. So the first phase of our outreach is now between April, and that's going to be the survey number 1 and a public meeting. And so we're going to do that verification of the network. We're going to prioritize those safety challenges that Paige just talked about. And we're going to be doing outreach events, tabling, pop-up events, and also doing this online and in-person survey collection. The second phase will kind of do that initialization of the network design that will be made through August, and that we will go back out to the community and do a survey number 2 plus a public meeting. Also central to our outreach efforts is working with all of you. You all will serve as our main stakeholder group for this effort moving forward. We will also stand up and host presentations and focus group meetings with a host of different stakeholders in the area. We will also staff pop-up events and tabling events, and our small group presentations and discussions. We have a smattering of events that we are going to be targeting as our first outreach efforts, and you can see those up on the screen. We have a whole list of other outreach efforts. If you have ideas, we want to hear from you. We know that there's a lot of good opportunities for us to meet and to go out and speak to the community about this effort. We will also be working to develop collateral and social media campaigns. We're almost done with a 1-pager. We're going to be sending out e-blast and project newsletter write-ups. I heard you loud and clear. You want to be informed. You want to know what's going on throughout the process, and we are going to be doing that in collaboration with you. We will be also working in close coordination with the media, including the Spanish-speaking outlets. We know that we have a multicultural staff person that will come in and help with that. So we'll make sure that we are using the medium and the outlets that you all use. And as I mentioned before, that we will be looking at you as our main stakeholder group. Next slide. So here we've kind of did a synopsis of what we are doing for next steps. We are in the process of developing a bilingual survey. This will be as our main call to action. We want to identify those safety challenges, identify those multimodal improvements, and using that toolbox that Paige referenced earlier to really tease out the concerns and the community's wishes and desires for this area. We're doing that now. We're reintroducing North Denver Safer Streets at this CAG meeting. So we're excited to be with you all here this evening. In February, which is literally next week, we will be implementing the community-based outreach partner program, and that's going to be working with local organizations. They'll serve as an extension of the outreach team. We will also begin staffing our first phase of pop-up and outreach events, so we will be out into the community, and you can see that Paige and I want to come back. We want to come back and do an NDSS specific CAG meeting. We want to dive deeper to the issues. We want you to be vocal and we want to hear from you. So look forward to that. In March, our goal is to host a public meeting to share out the project information and further promote the survey and continue our outreach efforts. I think that was it, right, Paige? I'm trying to remember our presentation.
Yep, I think you covered
Yep.
it.
Okay.
That was you took many more breaths than I did in the presentation. But I think, yeah, Chris is now going to cover next CAG meeting. I don't know if we have time for questions, maybe not.
We can. Chris's computer just crashed on us, so if we want to take a few questions.
Can I just make an observation? I didn't see on the outreach, physical places. I didn't see Johnson Rec Center or Swansea. You had a multi-generational thing that you indicated was going to be at CSU Spur, which is somewhat harder for the combination of the populations to get to.
Okay.
I think you ought to really consider if you're going to do one.
We've got Johnson and we've got Swansea on there. I couldn't put all of them on there. Once we vet them with DOTI, we can share them out with you. So, but thank you. We do want to receive your recommendations.
My name's Chad. I was going to say, yeah, along with that, I did see Swansea. It said they have a bingo. I don't think their bingo has been very strong for a long time.
Okay.
But some of the notations you had on those rec centers, like at Swansea Elementary, it says youth and families. That kind of sounds exclusionary, where it might be just inviting the youth and the families of school students. So I think you ought to update that. And then I have another big question about, I know that some of the bike lanes have been planned and maybe even designed several years ago in the Swansea Elyria, Swansea, like you say, Swansea, I appreciate that. And then Elyria, and I do want to let people know that we are two different neighborhoods, even though the city's been lumping us for years, but we will stand together. But the point is that some of those bike lanes were planned. They may have been funded as far as design and funding available now for construction. What do you say to that?
So Chad, there are two projects. One is Lincoln Street in Globeville, so it's the north-south neighborhood bikeway. That is designed, but we are looking for funding for construction on that. And then, and maybe you're referring to in Elyria-Swansea neighborhood.
That's one of the possibles. I thought there was more, but York Street, Josephine, Clayton, maybe?
Yeah, so just starting with Clayton, that project I think got paused, and we're gonna revisit that as part of the North Denver Safer Streets. And then York Josephine, so improvements were made, I believe south, gosh, I don't quite remember the extent. So short-term improvements were made farther south, I think, south of 39th, and then there are plans for north of 39th, north, I think all the way to I-70, maybe a little bit past. And those we are looking for funding to construct. And I think we're applying to grants right now to look for construction on that.
Well, let me go back then. When you said some of those other projects, maybe Clayton was paused, what does that mean, that it was paused? That mean you're taking it off the table, you're using that money somewhere else if it had been funded?
I don't know all the details, Chad, but we are going to revive it as part of North Denver Safer Streets. So we're going to be talking about it. We're going to be, if it comes up as a priority street, we're going to be designing and implementing changes. But I can find out more details if you're curious, Chad.
And I enjoyed that the interactive map that you had over the summer that we were able to put input on. And will you be doing that again?
So we won't be doing an interactive map. We're going to focus most of our outreach in person and with the stakeholder group and focus group meetings. But we will have an online survey as well. So that'll be how we reach people online.
Let's thanks, Chad. Is that we've got Rebecca has her hand up as well. Rebecca?
Hi, yes. So I just kind of want to just regroup and reiterate. So how do you plan to bring people to these outreach events? You said you're tabling all of this. My main concern is the lack of communication and efforts from before. So how are you gonna make sure that this time we are getting more residents, more outreach on a more personal and intimate level, as opposed to just handing out flyers, which a lot of people, it ends up in the trash. How are you guys gonna improve outreach for this?
Thank you for your question. It's so poignant. We're going to work in collaboration. I mentioned with OV, they will be administering the CBOP program. And then at CAG, we have multicultural staff who are very familiar with this area. So we will be using them. I will use a term that my colleague uses. He says, canvass the area. He wants to canvass the area. He just doesn't want a flyer. He wants to actually make that connection with you. He wants to talk with the community members. So as Paige mentioned, we're a little bit bound by what we can do in terms of funding and everything, but we are going to be as approachable and as integrated in this effort as possible. We will be doing it with the Spanish media. We've had really good luck on other projects working with them, Connect to Colorado. So we will do project interviews, and then they will go out on the channels that the residents in GS look at. We will be using WhatsApp. We know that that is a medium that is used in this community. As you mentioned, you saw where we have that list, and we will keep building on that list in collaboration with you all. You are the ones that know the community the best. So we want to work with you on identifying those. We will do social media campaigns. All of our materials will be translated into both Spanish and English. On that one, we will set up a project hotline. We are going to be doing that. So there's just a whole host of tactics that we can use, and we can always pivot. We always learn and along the way. And so we can pivot those engagement strategies to best meet the needs based on input from all of you.
Okay. And just to kind of add to that, so not everybody's on social media. There's a lot of people very old school. My father-in-law, he doesn't do cell phones. They don't have the internet. They just use a basic home phone. There's a lot of folks, especially our elders, that get overlooked a lot because things are posted on, social media. They don't have access to that. You know, things are like the WhatsApp. They don't even know what
Right.
that stuff is.
Right, exactly. So I know that Christian on our team has identified the Zumba classes because he knows, you know, a contingency of folks you go to Zumba classes. So we'll meet with them. You know, we want to go to where people are at. And you're absolutely right about those people who don't use the internet. They don't know, you know, they just don't do it. So we have to look at that group as well.
Yeah. And then there's
If I-
also disabled, you know, that don't get out. They don't go to the rec centers, you know, they have limited mobility. So I think the most important thing is outreach, where you're literally going door to door. You are talking to people that actually live there and have been in the neighborhoods. You know, the flyering, I can probably say about 30% of the people get reached if you flyer every single door in the neighborhood. About 30% of the people are going to get reached. A lot of, you know, 70%, that's a huge chunk. And, you know, there's residents that have been here for generations and generations. And I feel like we don't have a voice. I feel like, you know, one person speaks for our entire neighborhood, and I don't think that it's fair. You know, and mind you, of course, just kind of raising awareness to those residents to be more involved. But I think there's got to be a better level of intimacy and you know, making things personal and actually getting to know our residents. You use, you know, different types of organizations, and I just feel that we need to come together and come up with something that works for everybody in the community and not just a certain chunk.
Great. Thank you. I agree.
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in real quick. Chris is having some technical difficulties. I think his computer crashed. But Rebecca, you hit the nail on the head. And any suggestions that you have, please give those to us, because that has been our struggle. And I think our struggle is going to become even harder given some of the political realities and some other things going on that we don't have any control over right now. So any ideas that anyone on this call has, and, you know, Rebecca, thank you for joining us. I know it's taking time out of your day. I can hear my kid taking a bath in the other room. You know, it takes time out of all of our days to be part of this. But again, any suggestions you may have, we really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And I think, Chris, are you joining us again, or are you still having trouble there? Oh, I saw his mic go on for just a second. In the meantime, it looks like Chad has another question, so I'm going to let Chad jump in here.
Okay, and just real quick, can you guys leave your contact information just so we can do like a follow-up?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I am finally back. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. Chad, is it a super urgent question, or can we close out the meeting? And we're gonna have a nice big meeting next session, next month actually, which I can share about. But want to make sure that you have space if it is time sensitive.
Yes, yeah, this is kind of important because I see that you guys were trying to contract a CBOP to get the word out, and you didn't go over that. I understand you guys are on the clock, but right now, none of us probably are. And can you speak to the CBOPs and that invitation that you had for residents to climb on board and do some outreach? It's very important because some of it says that you're trying to wrap that up by the end of this month.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep, we do currently have, we're accepting interest. If folks have interest in kind of getting engaged in the project as being kind of advocates or, you know, community-based outreach partners. That's what the CBOP stands for. I would really encourage you to reach out to myself, and I'll make sure to put my email in the chat, and I will connect you with the project team And it is time sensitive. We're trying to deliver these projects as soon as possible to help improve safety and connectivity within the community. So we are looking to have anyone who's interested in that reaching out to us so that we can get you connected by the end of next week. Great question, Chad. And we're very interested in getting you involved.
Okay, I've gotten a little bit of information. That's why I brought it up. But these other people that are on this Zoom, I don't believe they have. So I was hoping that you would speak to it about them before the period runs out when you're recruiting.
Yes.
It might take a couple more minutes, Chris, but we'd appreciate it if you did it.
Yeah. Paige, I don't know if you feel comfortable. I know you were out. Either Paige or Beth, I think, might be able to speak to this. I know Kathy, you're very well too.
So I might ask Kathy if she's had any involvement with Nora. So while the CBOP program is coming together, I am not specifically familiar with all the current details. I know there's been some initial outreach. I know there was interest in the organizations, but do we have an update on that, or is that something we can?
Right.
Do
Beth,
we need to push? Yeah.
Yeah, that's I know the solicitations have been sent out, and so that they're in the process of identifying the community partners in which to work with, and it is moving at a fast pace just because we want to get it going. We want to start doing the outreach in the area. So, but we also don't want to be so fast that we don't get the right people that maybe want to be involved, is what I would say to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what if, since unfortunately we don't have all the details that you're looking for tonight, but maybe this is something that the information we can pull together a little better and send out to this group of folks that are on this call as an update when we're through Chris, because he kind of manages communication for this group. So we're happy to do that. And it's certainly, it's not closed. There's certainly room to discuss it. So why don't we get that information out and we can follow up with those that are interested.
Yeah, it seems like a fair thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Thanks, Chad. All right, we'll send that follow-up email. And as a reminder, all of these meetings are recorded and we publish them to the DOTI YouTube page. That's the handle at Denver DOTI. And definitely would love if folks send the meeting recording out. We're really excited to get engaged and get started partnering with community to develop these kind of short, medium-term improvements with the North Denver Safer Streets project. I think that's a great way for folks who, maybe we're busy right now or weren't able to make the meeting to get the information. So we'll send out the link to the meeting recording in English and Spanish in that follow-up meeting here tomorrow or Friday by the very latest, so that folks can get that information. And then our next meeting is a little sooner than our normal kind of every 3 months meeting cadence. Our next meeting is going to be on the last Thursday of February, which is February 27th, Thursday, February 27th, from 6 to 7:30. It's going to be a community workshop around the North Denver Safer Streets. So really focused, intensive work on this specific project. So would really appreciate the support, kind of getting the word out. I know, Chad, you're really helping us get the word out and get folks plugged into the project. But if anyone else here is interested in getting their community involved, we really love that support. We'll include that next meeting information in that follow-up email as well, so that it's all in one single email. All right. Well, as always, please feel free to reach out. We'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible with any questions. And keep an eye out for those emails on the North Denver Safer Streets project. And thanks again for your time this evening, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.